Here's an expanded and refined version of the original English text, keeping the meaning and grammar intact. Welcome to Berlin, Mr. President of Ukraine. Dear Volodymyr, it is with great warmth that we welcome you here in Berlin, at the Federal Chancellery. Shortly after I assumed office, we had the opportunity to meet in Kiev, together with Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, and Donald Tusk. I am very pleased that you accepted my invitation to visit me here in Berlin today. For the third year now, people in Ukraine have been resisting Russia's war of aggression. They are defending their lives, their country, and our shared freedom. They are also defending Europe's security against Moscow's militaristic revisionism. We stand with the people of Ukraine. We stand with you, dear Volodymyr. And we are deeply grateful to the Ukrainian people for everything they are doing. We support them, and we will continue to support Ukraine for as long as necessary. From our conversation today, I would like to highlight 5 key points. First, the war has transformed the relationship between Ukraine and Germany. Our societies have grown closer, and so have our governments. Almost every federal minister is now actively engaged in close and ongoing collaboration with their respective Ukrainian counterparts, and it is our firm intention to further deepen and expand this cooperation in the future. That is why, later this year, we will hold Ukrainian-German intergovernmental consultations for the first time in many years. Secondly, Russia's brutal war of aggression undoubtedly has a significant impact on the relationship between Kiev and Berlin, but it should not be allowed to overshadow or define every aspect of our bilateral cooperation. That is why we are thinking together about the future, even in the midst of war. Following this press conference, we will meet with representatives of German businesses to discuss future economic opportunities. Here's an expanded and polished version of the sentence, with increased character count while keeping the meaning and grammar intact. There is enormous potential for deep and mutually beneficial cooperation between Germany and Ukraine across a wide range of areas, including energy, infrastructure, construction, agriculture, engineering, medical technology, and numerous other key sectors of the economy. We want to unlock that potential together, as partners. Third, we spoke in detail about how to strengthen diplomatic efforts toward achieving a ceasefire. Volodymyr, you made it absolutely clear, no one wants peace more than Ukraine. For several weeks now, Kiev has been ready to agree to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. The Ukrainian government has expressed its readiness to move forward and take the next step by initiating detailed technical negotiations with the Russian side, be it in the Vatican, in Geneva, or at any other mutually agreed-upon location. Here's an expanded and polished version of the sentence, keeping the meaning and grammar accurate. We Europeans stand fully prepared and committed to supporting such negotiations. Moreover, I am confident that there is strong and unwavering unity on this matter among our partners in Paris, London, Warsaw, Rome, Helsinki, Brussels, as well as many other important European capitals. We are also counting on support from the United States. Their engagement is indispensable to the success of these talks. I want to thank the American president personally for his efforts in recent weeks. Moscow is trying to buy time. We are still waiting for a response to the memorandum on negotiations that President Putin announced 1 week ago. The massive airstrikes on Kiev that took place this past weekend are clearly not the language of peace. They represent the harsh and brutal language of war, of aggressive and unprovoked warfare. It is a slap in the face to everyone working toward a ceasefire, in Ukraine, in Europe, and in the United States. That is why we are increasing pressure on Russia. We are doing so to weaken Moscow's war machine. And we are doing so to pave the way for meaningful negotiations. Let me speak clearly on behalf of Germany. We will do everything in our power to ensure that Nord Stream 2 will never go into operation. Fourth, we discussed military support from Germany for Ukraine. I stand by what I have already stated. I will not go into operational details. But I can assure you of this: our military support will not only continue but also expand significantly, ensuring that Ukraine has the necessary means to defend itself both now and well into the future against ongoing Russian aggression. In this context, I want to underscore something important. Germany is funding a significant portion of the costs for Starlink in Ukraine. And today, our defense ministers are set to formally sign a letter of intent to acquire advanced long-range weapons systems that have been developed in Ukraine, commonly referred to as long-range fires. Here's an expanded version of the sentence, preserving the meaning and ensuring correct grammar. There will be absolutely no restrictions whatsoever on the provision or use of long-range weapons. Ukraine will be fully empowered and equipped to defend itself effectively, and to carry out precise strikes on military targets located beyond its own national territory. This marks the beginning of a new phase in our defense industrial cooperation, with tremendous potential for both our countries. And finally, fifth, our joint work is guided by a shared compass. We want the guns in Ukraine to fall silent. We want lasting peace for Ukraine. We want security for our common Europe. And we are pursuing all of this in close partnership with our friends in Europe and the United States. Dear Volodymyr, thank you once again for your visit. I want to thank you personally, and I want to thank Ukraine, its people, its government, and all those who have been fighting for the past 3 years. Let me say once more, we stand with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Friedrich, esteemed Chancellor, distinguished guests, respected journalists. Thank you for today's talks. It is extremely important that we are indeed working together to bring peace closer and to give our people greater security. And it matters that we are doing our utmost to be as effective as possible in this effort.
You didn't have translation? And still? Now you have?
No, we don't have it either. Shall we check that? Give us a second.
Okay.
German technology.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, here we go.
Зараз є
Okay.
переклад?
No, it works.
Точно?
Yeah, Deutschland.
Dear Friedrich,
Фрідрих. Дорогий Фрідрих, що я зараз сказав?
Lieber Friedrich.
Я.
Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, once again, thank you.
Дякую.
And thank you, personally, for your recent visit to Kyiv with our friends.
Разом з нашими друзями
That visit was of great significance.
був дуже
Your support, and most importantly, support for the Ukrainian people inside Ukraine, was a crucial signal.
в Україні.
We discussed many issues and reached a number of important agreements.
Багато про що домовились.
Today's meeting was also highly important and substantial.
Також дуже важлива і предметна перемовини.
What matters is that we are working together to bring peace closer and provide our people with more security.
Людям нашим дати їм більше безпеки,
We are striving to be as effective as possible in this.
що максимально ефективними.
Germany is among the global leaders in supporting Ukraine and the international order based on rules, and these rules must be preserved, so that normal life can also be preserved for people everywhere.
Нормальне життя людей теж збереглось.
This is precisely what we discussed today: our shared diplomacy, our shared security, and our joint projects between Ukraine and Germany.
України з Німеччиною.
First of all, bringing peace closer.
Узгодження миру.
We discussed in detail the current diplomatic opportunities and the state of negotiations.
У перемовинах
For over a week, the world has been waiting for the Russians to complete their so-called memorandum, what they supposedly need to stop killing people.
потрібно, щоб зупинити вбивства людей.
Everyone is waiting, but so far they have come up with nothing new, only recycling old ultimatums and throwing them into the information space.
Повтори своїх старих
Ukraine believes there must be no preconditions for a ceasefire.
Умов для припинення вогню
It must happen unconditionally and as soon as possible.
та якнайшвидше.
And I thank Germany for supporting this position.
Ми всі маємо не забувати
We must all remember what causes any war of aggression, including this war by Russia against the people of Ukraine.
і цієї війни Росії проти України, людей України.
It is the criminal desire to kill and destroy.
Вбивати людей та руйнувати життя.
Russia must abandon that desire.
Відмовитись від цього бажання.
And for that to truly happen, pressure is required.
Потрібен тиск на Росію.
All forms of pressure that will force Russia to feel the consequences of its shameful actions.
Наслідки цих
That is why sanctions must continue to be strengthened.
санкцій проти
Dragging out the war must become painful for Moscow.
війни має стати болісним.
And that is possible.
І це можливо.
Germany is supporting us in this effort to intensify sanctions.
Санкції.
Thank you. Second, security. Germany has done a great deal to strengthen our air defense and our defense forces in general.
Сил оборони.
Thousands of lives have already been saved because of this.
Ви всі бачите, що
Everyone can see what Putin is doing night after night: massive drone strikes, dozens of cruise missiles, ballistic attacks, hundreds of drones.
балістику, сотні дронів.
That is why we need constant support with air defense systems just to protect lives in our cities.
Постійної підтримки
Here's an expanded version of the sentence with correct grammar and preserved meaning.
важливі.
At present, we have reached very important and significant agreements with Germany concerning air defense cooperation and capabilities.
Німеччина нас постійно підтримує.
Germany continues to support us with air defense missiles.
Хотів би
And I am deeply grateful for that. I want to emphasize, this kind of support deprives Russian terror of its effectiveness.
російського терору.
And likewise, when we talk about new military aid for our army, greater range for our armed forces, we are talking about how to neutralize the sense and logic behind Russia's offensive actions.
Це сенсу російські наступальні дії.
As long as Putin believes in his assaults, his strikes, his offensives, he will avoid genuine diplomacy.
Дати реальної дипломатії.
That is why we need further defense cooperation among all of Europe and between Europe and the United States of America.
Зі Сполученими Штатами
That is why we need sufficient long-range capabilities.
далекобійність.
That is why we must have confidence in the funding of our army and the resilience of Ukraine.
Та стійкості України. Саме для цього
That
треба
is why Russian frozen assets must be used, and Germany can help us with this.
Німеччина може в цьому нам допомогти.
Third, joint production.
Виробництва.
I am pleased that today we reached new agreements between our countries on joint projects.
Щодо спільних проєктів.
We will not disclose all the details publicly, but we now have agreements on investment in production within Ukraine.
Про інвестиції виробництва в Україні.
First and foremost in the production of weapons, including drones,
Виробництво з дронів.
which are key to saving the lives of our soldiers as effectively as possible.
Для наших воїнів.
In addition, our government representatives signed agreements on cooperation in construction and industrial development.
І розвиток виробництва.
Later today, together with Friedrich, the Chancellor, and representatives of German business, we will be holding talks.
Представниками німецького бізнесу для
For us in Ukraine, it is fundamentally important that German companies be as actively involved in Ukraine's reconstruction as Germany is in supporting our defense during wartime.
суттєво підтримує наш захист у час війни.
As Friedrich already mentioned, we have agreed to relaunch the intergovernmental format between Ukraine and Germany at the level of President and Chancellor so that our joint outcomes can be truly significant.
Результати були значними.
Thank you, Friedrich. Thank you, Germany. Glory to Ukraine.
Good afternoon. Honorable Federal Chancellor, what about the Taurus missiles? When you were in opposition, you supported this idea, and we thought it was only a matter of time. Representatives of the Ukrainian community in Berlin, tell us, will we find out? We're talking about investments in Ukrainian weaponry, including long-range arms. But when is that realistic? When is it realistically possible for us to receive these weapons? Because time does not wait. Thank you.
We stated that later today, in the second half of the day, defense ministers will sign a declaration of intent regarding enhanced cooperation in the production of long-range weaponry. We want to transform this production process. We also want to establish joint manufacturing, and we will support this. We will publicly speak about the details. We will intensify our cooperation, but first and foremost, we will ensure that the Ukrainian army receives everything it needs, everything we can provide, so that Ukraine can successfully defend itself. This will be one of the topics in our upcoming discussions.
Thank you for the question. Today, our respective sides are formally signing the relevant documents which will officially mark the commencement of financing and support for these important new projects. These projects already exist. What we truly want is for these to be produced in the sufficient quantities that we critically and urgently need. Today, the first steps in financing will be taken between our countries.
Hello, Nina Hauser from DW, Germany's international broadcaster, Chancellor.
You prefer not to go into detail, but can we talk about the sources of funding for this support for Ukraine, including for sustaining those long-range capabilities? Do you also expect, for example, to use frozen Russian assets? And, Mr. President, if I may, NATO is holding a very important summit next month. Have you been invited? And in your view, what would make it a meaningful summit?
Here's a further expanded version with more detail, keeping the meaning and grammar precise. Last year, during the G7 summit, we came to a crucial agreement that the frozen Russian assets would accumulate interest, and that this accumulated interest, now already reaching a significant total of 50 billion euros, would be specifically allocated to support Ukraine in its ongoing efforts. We will bring up and address this important topic once again at the upcoming G7 summit. Here's an expanded and polished version of the sentence, maintaining meaning and proper grammar. I want to make it absolutely clear, the federal government will continue to provide strong and unwavering financial support for Ukraine throughout the entire year of 2025. We are firmly counting on including a substantial and clearly designated allocation for Ukraine in our upcoming budget for the year 2026 as well. We will try to do this as efficiently as possible. In order to purchase as many weapons as possible, we will launch production jointly. We have already discussed some of the details today. I must apologize, these matters must first be discussed directly between both governments. We have already received encouraging signals from our partners concerning Ukraine's active participation in the upcoming NATO summit. But just like you, we want to have a completely open conversation with our partners. What matters is the nature of that participation, and what concrete results Ukraine would gain from being involved in that summit. I believe that is fair and honest. In my view, if Ukraine is not present at the NATO summit, that would be a victory not over Ukraine, but over NATO, and a victory for Putin. So the decision lies with our partners.
I have a question for both leaders. Mr. President, I would like to ask you about a possible next round of peace talks. The US President's special envoy announced that it might take place in Geneva, and at the highest level, that is, with the participation of the presidents of Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. Is this meeting being prepared? Under what conditions could it take place, and has it already been decided that it will be held in Geneva? A question to the Federal Chancellor. France and the United Kingdom have stated that they want to take part in peace negotiations. However, right now, it seems that the main discussions, or negotiations, are occurring primarily between the United States, Russia, and Ukraine themselves. Has Europe been excluded? Is it merely playing a supportive role? Or is Ukraine representing the entire European position?
We will support any effort that leads to further dialogue. These negotiations were initially agreed upon when the first round of technical talks took place in Istanbul. But as the Ukrainian president has said, we've now been waiting many days for this so-called memorandum. And we see absolutely no readiness from the Russian side to engage in any negotiations, regardless of the venue. I am deeply grateful to President Zelensky for saying that he is ready to negotiate, even without preconditions. And of course, we in Europe are offering to be part of this process, together with our American partners. But the crucial point is that the talks must actually happen. In recent days and weeks, we have seen absolutely no diplomatic efforts whatsoever from the Russian side to move negotiations forward. If anyone now claims that we have not done enough diplomatically, that person has clearly been asleep for the past 3 weeks. Because Europe has made more diplomatic efforts in the last 3 weeks than at any other point during this war. Of course, we coordinated all of this with President Zelensky, with President Trump, and I hope Russia sees that. I hope they recognize our determination to do everything we can to support meaningful diplomatic steps and achieve a ceasefire. If that does not serve as clear proof of serious intent, then frankly, I don't know what else could possibly demonstrate it. We do not want to prolong this any further. We want the entire world to force Russia to end this war.
We are absolutely working in unity, as Friedrich has said. We talk all the time. There is no secrecy among us. These discussions are not hidden because we are trying to conceal something. It's just that we have constant communication among ourselves within the European Union, with our European partners, and with the United States. We speak about this daily and are fully prepared. The key issue is not the format. The only thing that matters is the outcome, the end of the war. That is our goal. Therefore, we remain open to any format or framework that could genuinely lead to peace, ensuring that Russia can no longer hide behind excuses, whether by claiming that the process was imposed by the West, rejecting Geneva as a venue, preferring the Vatican, suggesting Istanbul once again, or changing its position on Istanbul altogether. They are always looking for reasons to avoid ending the war. And frankly, it does not seem serious. They reject neutral Geneva but want to negotiate in a NATO country like Turkey. So clearly, it's not about the country or the alliance, it is entirely about Putin. It is entirely about delay. They constantly search for ways to postpone the format in which the war could be brought to an end. Even though everyone agrees to at least begin with a ceasefire as the first step. Let's make that happen. I believe that only pressure will work, because otherwise, they simply do not want to act. We have been waiting for sanction-related steps. We were genuinely waiting for them to propose an agenda from their side. A ceasefire first and then an agenda for a leaders' meeting. We were expecting that before the prisoner exchange. Then they said the agenda, or a memorandum, or whatever they call it, would follow immediately after the exchange. But after the exchange, we received nothing. Our side has been in contact with the Russians. The Minister of Defense contacted Mr. Medinsky in Russia. They said, yes, it's coming, but we never received anything. No one did. We asked the United States, they are still waiting as well. Everyone is waiting. But perhaps we should stop waiting and start taking more serious steps.
Michel, German Federal Press Agency. Honorable Federal Chancellor, during your visit to Ukraine, you issued a warning to the Russian president regarding sanctions. You said, quite unequivocally, that if he did not agree to a ceasefire, there would be consequences. Yet nothing happened. What are you still waiting for? When will those sanctions be implemented? And a question regarding the production of long-range weapons. What exactly is being discussed? Is the issue related to financing, the supply of specific components, or perhaps the provision of technical support from our Bundeswehr? And, Mr. President, with regard to these sanctions that you heard discussed in Kyiv, but which have not yet been formally enacted, are you feeling disappointed by the delay? And what can you say about the production of long-range weapons, either within Ukraine or with support from the European Union, or even the potential supply of Taurus missiles?
Since my visit to Kiev just over 2.5 weeks ago, we have successfully adopted the 17th comprehensive package of sanctions. That was on Tuesday. This package had been under preparation for quite some time, and it is a direct result of that visit. Russia showed no willingness to agree to a ceasefire, and as a result, this package was enacted. Right now, we are working on the 18th package of sanctions. We are in discussions with the United States. You are well aware that both the US government and Congress are currently engaged in active and ongoing debates regarding the implementation of new sanctions. We understand about these conversations, and I am personally involved in those discussions. Thirdly, today we took a first step in a new direction. I am referring to the production of long-range weapons through cooperation between Ukraine and Germany. This will be an industrial-scale partnership. It will be industrial volumes. And this will happen and can happen here and in Germany. And it will take place both in Ukraine and in Germany. I can assure you that Russia's hesitation to engage in negotiations, even just to silence the guns, will have consequences. And we are implementing those consequences, day by day. I've just given you 3 specific examples. When I was in Ukraine, we waited for a response from Russia. That response never came. So now we are preparing further steps. Recently, I had a rather private conversation with journalists in Ukraine. The topic of sanctions came up, and I shared the information we had received from our intelligence services. I explained to them that, although we all recognize that Russia's economy has already started to experience the effects of the sanctions, the true and significant impact on their military, which continues to be heavily funded, will not be fully felt until next year, likely around June, during the summer of 2026. That is far too long for us. Here's an expanded and polished version of the sentence, keeping the meaning and grammar intact. We never wanted this devastating war to begin, and we certainly do not wish to be engaged in a prolonged conflict lasting for years. Truly, no one desires such a scenario. What is needed to make Russia's economy feel the pressure sooner? Stronger sanctions packages. That's the only way to accelerate the financial weakening of their military. This can be approximated as much as possible. This means imposing tougher sanctions on Russia's energy sector, and on components supplied by various countries, including some in the West, whose private sectors are still providing parts used in Russia's production of long-range weapons. This includes missiles, drones, and so on. To stop this, we need stronger sanctions and a firm price cap on Russian energy exports. We are already discussing this. And Friedrich is absolutely right. This cannot be done by Europe alone. The 17th package helps. But it is not enough. We are very hopeful the 18th package will be adopted soon. It is already being developed, and we are grateful for specific elements it contains. But what is urgently needed is a powerful sanctions package from the United States. Russia refuses to agree to a ceasefire. I believe there is nothing now preventing the US Senate from showing the political will to vote for this package. Here's an expanded and polished version of the sentence, preserving meaning and correct grammar. If they take those steps, we will be one important step closer to bringing this war to an end much sooner. Only then will their economy, and Putin personally, feel the consequences. Only then will their military face a budget shortfall. That is the only realistic path forward, alongside diplomacy. As for the long-range weapons you mentioned, whether produced in Germany or other countries, we absolutely need them. And yes, we are actively discussing these